Go ahead.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Barron.
Uh-huh.
Or Officer Barron, across the street from.
Can you turn your microphone on?
Oh, sorry, there you go. Across the street from Neverland on Figueroa Mountain Road, there are two schools, is that correct?
That's correct.
What kind of schools are they?
One is a boarding school, and one is like an elementary school, I believe.
Okay, and are these private schools?
Yes.
People are there during the day?
Yes.
So there's activity, at least during the school year, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, February and March of 2003, those schools would have been open. People would have been there?
Yes.
Parents coming and going?
Yes.
Teachers?
Yes.
Administrators?
Yes.
Now, you told us about the security staff that you were a member of, correct?
Correct.
And you told us about the fire department?
Correct.
Did Mr. Jackson also have personal security or personal bodyguards?
Yes.
And are these people who traveled with him?
Yes.
You did not travel with Mr. Jackson, is that correct?
No.
So your duties were pretty much restricted to the ranch. I shouldn't say restricted, it's a big ranch, but you were there at the ranch, correct?
Yes.
If he went to Los Angeles or Miami or went on tour or anything else, you would not go with him, is that correct?
No.
And who would go with him?
Whomever was his personal security at the time. It did change.
All right, so he did have people who were generally experienced in going on the road and protecting a celebrity under those circumstances, is that correct?
There were times when he did, yes.
Okay, there were some times when you thought his personal security may not have been.
Yes.
Quite as, okay, all right, now, do you remember Janet Arvizo?
I know she was there. I do not remember her face until yesterday.
All right, but you remember her being there and you remember having some contact with her, is that correct?
Yes.
And you remember Gavin Arvizo?
Yes.
You remember Star Arvizo?
Yes.
And in general, did Janet Arvizo ever appear to not want to be at the ranch?
In general, I couldn't answer.
Objection. I'm going to object on the basis of foundation.
Sustained.
All right, would it be your opinion, based on your seeing her there at the ranch, that what stood out in your mind was that Mrs. Arvizo appeared that she wanted to be there?
Objection. Same objection.
Sustained.
All right, what kind of contact did you have with Janet Arvizo?
Probably talked to her on the phone once or twice. Other than that, relatively none.
When you talked to her on the phone, did it appear that she wanted to be there at the ranch?
Yes.
And Janet Arvizo had access to the house, full access to the house, is that correct?
Objection. Foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
I don't know.
Okay, do you recall testifying before the Santa Barbara Grand Jury on April the 12th, 2004?
Yes.
Do you recall telling the grand jury that Janet Arvizo was one of the people who had access? She would have access to the house?
Yes.
And when the district attorney said, okay, you said, no question.
Yes.
Is that correct? And she had full access to the house because her children were there, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, now, did you have any personal observations about the behavior of Gavin and Star?
No.
They appeared, from what you could see, they appeared to want to be at the ranch, is that correct?
Objection. Foundation.
Sustained.
Did you see them from time to time at the ranch?
Seldom.
Was there any indication, from the seldom times that you saw them, was there any indication that they did not want to be at the ranch?
No.
You indicated that part of security's job was to monitor who was coming onto the property, correct?
Correct.
And that was recorded, to a large extent, in the gate logs, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you aware that in addition to just plain interlopers, that there would be people who would try to gain some kind of introduction to Mr. Jackson to get into his favor?
Objection. Ambiguous. Foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
How do you mean?
Well, were there people who seemed to be trying to get close to Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
And sometimes Mr. Jackson really wouldn't want those people to be around him, correct?
Correct.
So if they were allowed on the ranch, they were to be treated courteously?
Yes, yes.
But nevertheless, you were to try to help Mr. Jackson not be bothered by people, is that right?
That's right.
And Mr. Jackson, of course, during the time you were there, and now, for that matter, is an international celebrity, an artist, a very well-known person, correct?
Yes.
And there would be people who would basically be trying to get into his good graces, is that right?
Objection. Foundation.
It's argumentative. Sustained.
Alright, now, let me ask you one other thing before we get to the gate logs and some of the other documents you identified. You were actually asked, let me put it a different way. You were contacted by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office in December of 2003, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in particular, Detective Bonner of the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department contacted you, is that correct?
Correct.
And he did an interview of you to determine if you'd seen anything unlawful and so on, is that correct?
That's correct.
But then he asked that you work as an informant, is that correct?
Yes.
And you were at that time a sworn peace officer of the Guadalupe Police Department, correct?
That's correct.
And he basically wanted you to go back to work for Mr. Jackson in December of 2003 to be an informant, correct?
That's correct.
And at that time, you know that the raid had already occurred on Mr. Jackson's house, correct?
Correct.
You knew Mr. Jackson had a lawyer, had counsel, right?
Yes.
And you were being asked to go in as a law enforcement informant into his ranch, at his home, and inform for the sheriff. Is that correct?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
And you refused to do that, is that right?
Yes.
What I'd like to do now is go through some of the exhibits that you've identified and ask you, based on your training and experience, to interpret the documents, okay? To the extent you were there, you made an entry, and then you can contribute that as well and say, yes, I actually wrote that.
Yes.
But to the extent that you introduced these documents, you said they were kept in the ordinary course of business. I'd like you to explain what they mean, if you could.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with Exhibit 300, and, Your Honor, if this procedure is acceptable, I'd like to do this without asking each time, or I can. Whatever the court wants me to do. What I propose to do is identify the document by exhibit number. If there is more than one page to the exhibit, I'll indicate which page of the exhibit. If, in the exhibits 334 and 335, there are hundreds of pages, so I'll refer to the Bates stamp number on the bottom of the page for that purpose. And if that procedure is acceptable, what I'd like to do then is put each of these up on the, not all of them, but each of the ones I want to point out on the overhead projector, and I'll just make reference to it at the time.
That's a fine procedure.
Okay, thank you. In other words, I won't ask leave each time. I'll just do it.
That's good.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, with the court's permission in advance, I'll put Exhibit 300 up.
Can you put input 4?
Or we'll put up Mr. Auchincloss's.
That was input 4.
What I'm going to do, I hope, is put it up in a way so we can show the exhibit tag number, if such exists, and then I'll give you an opportunity here to see what the document is, best we can. If you want me to, this was printed pretty large, so we can do it this way, if you want me to scroll it up or down. If you'd like me to approach and give it to you, if you can't read it, I'll just walk up and show it to you. So just let me know.
Okay.
This is Exhibit 300, and it appears at the top to be an accident damage report, okay?
Okay.
And I think you told us that was kept in the ordinary course of business, is that correct?
Correct.
And the accident damage report appears to have been generated on a computer, is that right?
Correct.
In other words, it's not just a form that's handwritten in, but somebody generated the whole thing on a computer, correct?
Yes.
And the format is such that it appears to be a standard format, and then you put in particular information based on the particular incident, is that correct?
That's correct.
Alright, now, what would be the purpose of this particular accident damage report? Let me rephrase that. What does this accident damage report refer to?
One of the golf carts.
Alright, and from that report and from the records, and based on your training and experience, can you explain what happened and why this report was written?
I can read it.
Okay, well, let's do it this way, because we'll start this way and then the other ones will speak for themselves. There's a date up there at the very top, right?
Yes.
June 21st, 02.
Yes.
Would that be the date of the incident?
Yes.
And then you have a date at the bottom. Would that be the date the report was written?
Yes.
And there's a time, 1610, so 4:10 in the afternoon, correct?
Correct.
And the time at the top would be 15:30, which would be 3:30 in the afternoon, correct?
Correct.
Alright, so this report is designed to document the fact that Gavin Arvizo was involved in crashing a golf cart into the theater fountain. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the cause of the accident was recorded as reckless driving. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Alright, now, you told us that you're supposed to be very courteous to the guests, no matter who they are, where they're from or whatever. Is it appropriate, however, for security officers to warn guests, particularly children, if they're involved in unsafe behavior?
Yes.
And based on this report, does it appear that there was a warning given to Gavin Arvizo about driving the golf cart?
Yes.
And the warning was to slow down or the golf cart would be taken away. Is that correct?
Correct.
So based on your experience in these records, that would indicate that an officer gave that warning to Gavin Arvizo?
Yes.
Alright, were you aware of other incidents involving Gavin or Star Arvizo that involves destruction of property or accidents or that sort of thing?
No.
Okay, did you review these records to see if you could find such evidence?
Not for that purpose, no.
Okay, that's fair enough. Actually, I didn't see that. I don't think it was on my copy. Maybe it was. On the back of 300 as a photograph. Does that appear to be a Polaroid type photograph?
Yes.
Is that the front of a golf cart?
Yes.
And it kind of looks like a car.
Well, you couldn't hold golf clubs on them. They're more of a car.
It's essentially the frame of a golf cart and it's got a little fiberglass car body on it?
Correct.
And this one, I think, is the Batmobile one. Is that?
We call it the Batman cart.
The Batman cart, okay. In any event, this photograph is taken to show damage that was associated with that report. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to go to Exhibit 301. And just so nobody gets too nervous, Your Honor, I'm going to keep these in order, but it's too hard to put them back on the sprocket there, and I'll do that when we're through, if that's all right.
Yes.
301 consists of a number of pages. And in the book, I would say it's page 4. It's the back of the second sleeved page. No, I'm sorry, it's the back of the first sleeved page, so it would be page 2, I suppose. And let me put this up, if I may. Do you want to see it first? Alright, Exhibit 301 is the front, and then the back of the sleeve is the next page. And we'll use this document for the purpose of orienting everybody to the way this works. At that time, there was a form that looked like this, correct?
Correct.
And that form was changed slightly as time went on. Is that correct?
Yes.
But essentially you've got, at the top, you have the blanket, routine authorized entries. That's people who might be making deliveries, that sort of thing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I see up there, for instance, Santa Barbara surfacing. Looks like somebody may have been there to do some surfacing work on the roads. Is that correct?
I don't know what they were doing, but yes.
Okay, just as an example, alright. And then I see, looks like it says, Santa Ynez Ford. It is a little hard to see.
Santa Ynez feed.
That would make more sense. Santa Ynez feed. That would be, for instance, you would assume somebody came on at 11:30 to deliver some feed, and by 11:57, or whatever that says, they went back out the gate, correct?
Correct.
And the in and out times on this are recorded at the time somebody comes in the gate, right?
Yes.
And the time they leave, right?
Yes.
So when somebody comes in the gates are opened if they're allowed to have access?
Right.
They stop the car or the truck right there by the guardhouse, correct?
Right.
And the guard comes up and greets them?
Yes.
And will write down who the person is and write down the exact time that it is at that moment. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when they leave, the same thing occurs in reverse. They're stopped before the gate. The guard will record who's in the vehicle and the time that they're leaving. Is that correct?
Well, yes. We would make sure it's the same person, and then we wouldn't record their name again, but we would just record their time out.
Their time out. Okay. So if somebody came in with 3 people and only left with 1, you'd want to know about that?
Yes.
Alright, now, we have the guest names down there. And guests would be people who are guests of the owner staying at the ranch, correct?
Correct.
And they might be guests who stay all day, and they might be guests that are coming and going that same day. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Alright, now, I don't know if it's the glare or what. It's a little hard to read. Can you read it from there?
For the most part.
Okay, right at the top of guests, it says, Grace, is that correct?
Yes.
And it says, C.O. And that means?
Carried over. They were carried over from the previous 24-hour period.
So, in other words, there's no entry time for Grace, because Grace was already there?
Already there at midnight the night before. This was prepared at midnight the night before.
And there's no indication that Grace left, so one would assume that she would still be there the next day?
At midnight of this day, this would be completed, and that CO, carry over, would be put in the out box. So she would continue to be carried over for the period.
So let's look down the list. And the third person on the list appears to have gotten there at 12:05. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that would be 5 minutes after noon. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then left at 1440 hours, which would be 2:40 in the afternoon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me who that person is?
I can't read that.
Alright, may I approach with a copy?
Yes.
Now that you have it in front of you, can you read the name?
Yes.
What does it say?
M. Bashir.
So Mr. Bashir came there at 5 minutes after noon and left at about 2:40, or left at exactly 2:40, correct?
Yes.
Let me leave that with you just for the moment, just in case you have trouble reading the rest of it.
Uh-huh.
On that same day, it appears Chris Tucker arrived. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Chris Tucker arrived at?
1500, or 3 p.m.
So 3 p.m. and it appears that at the same time Chris Tucker arrived, a number of other people came through the gate. Is that correct?
Yes.
And those people include Gavin Arvizo?
Yes.
Star Arvizo?
Yes.
There are a couple of other people there, and then I think there are 3 other people, and then there's something that says, Gaveline. Or what do you think it says?
Well, it looks like maybe, Aubrey.
Below that. Right below that.
Gavel, yeah, Gaveline. Gaveline.
Gaveline. Do people always get the spelling right at the gate?
Not always, no.
Okay, you try your best, but sometimes you just spell it the way you thought you heard it?
The way it sounds, yeah.
Alright, so those people, plus Adrian, Kelly Bond and Aubrey, or Audrey, whatever that says, all those people seem to have come at 3 o'clock on the dot, correct?
Yes.
Alright, now, it appears that Mr. Tucker and the Arvizos did not leave, and I'll ask you to assume, just for the sake of this question, that Gaveline is an Arvizo. But those 3 people came at 3 o'clock and they did not leave that day, is that right?
Correct.
Alright, let me retrieve my book, if I may. Thank you. I guess I was asking permission of the court to approach there, to be specific. I'm now going to go to Exhibit 302, and this would be what appears to be the third page of 302 in the exhibit, the official exhibit book. So this does not have a tag on it, but the first page does. And I'm sure I would be corrected if I were wrong. This is 302 I'm putting up, the third page. So let's start up here, first of all. This is on 6/22, the date following the day that we just saw, is that correct?
Yes.
And we look down here, and we see that it appears that Chris Tucker, Gavin, Star, and the other people we talked about, and then this Gaveline all show that they are carried over. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they're carried over not only from the day before, but they appear to be carried over to the next day.
Correct.
And if we look at 303, and we'll take page 2 of 303. It's on the back of the envelope here. So that's 303, and I'll turn it over, and that's the guest names. And once again, Chris Tucker, Gavin, Starr, and Gaviline are all carried over as guests. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I'm sorry. That's the next day, 6 to 23. Is that correct?
Yes.
We go to 304, Exhibit 304. Looking at page 2 of 304, page 2, June 24, 02?
Yes.
And again, we show Chris Tucker, Gavin, Starr, and Gaviline all carried over. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it doesn't show any checkout time for them or any time they went by the gate. Is that correct?
No, that's correct.
And then 305. This would be the third page, June 25, 02. And it shows Chris Tucker, Gavin, Starr. And I don't see Gaviline on there or Devellin, or anything else like that. But it shows that Chris Tucker's group left at 7:54 in the morning. Is that correct?
Correct.
So they would have been there overnight and then they left together?
Correct.
Okay, now, if we skip ahead time-wise to, it's Exhibit 306, and it's page 2 of 306, it says, June 29, 02 on the top, and it appears that Gavin, Starr, and Devellin, and a limo driver all showed up at 46 minutes after midnight. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Gavin, Starr, and Devellin all stayed there overnight that day, correct?
Correct.
And the limo driver got a cup of coffee and left, looks like.
Yes.
Okay, and then going to Exhibit 307, about June 30, 02, we have Gavin, Starr, and Devellin all staying overnight at the ranch, correct?
Correct.
Alright, excuse me just 1 second. Off the record discussion held at council table. Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm sorry, I just had to clear something up. Okay, I want to. Just because it's in sequence in the exhibits, let me show you 308, and this is a different kind of a form. And we'll be able to go a lot quicker here. And actually, we'll skip quite a ways ahead in a moment, just so everybody has something to anticipate. 308. Okay, and I'll try to get as much of a wide angle as I can and still read it. Do you see that? It says, security clearance and general information.
Yes. Guest information.
Or, I'm sorry, I can't read it. Alright, I can read it here. Guest information. And this is information about the people who were arriving. And actually, this dates back a little out of sequence. It dates back to June 21, 02, correct?
Correct.
And basically this is information so you know how to treat the guests and what they can do. Is that right?
We know who's coming and what they're able to do.
Okay, so this tells you the estimated time of arrival. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you never know exactly if somebody's going to arrive on time, but it gives you a heads up, right?
Right.
And it shows Chris Tucker, Gavin Arvizo, Starr Arvizo, Adrian, Kelly, Gaviline, and Aubrey, it looks like. So on 6 to 21, this was telling you these people are really going to show up, right?
Yes.
And then at the bottom, it says Mr. Jackson has cleared the guests to have full access, correct?
Correct.
So Chris Tucker and his guests are allowed to have full access to all of these activities. Is that right?
That's right.
And those activities include the Hill House, pool, spa, water fort, dance studio, and then quad runners. Is that right?
Yes.
And what were the quad runners?
ATVs.
Were people supposed to keep those on the property?
They were property of the ranch.
But, I mean, they weren't supposed to go drive on Figueroa Mountain Road.
Correct.
And they definitely were not supposed to go into Los Olivos.
No.
Alright, and then there's scooters, right?
Uh-huh.
Golf carts?
Yes.
Jet skis. The main house. And ridden in is horseback riding.
Yes.
So Mr. Jackson, according to this record, kept in the ordinary course of business, had cleared the guests to have full access to all of those activities?
Yes.
And those guests would be Mr. Tucker and the Arvizos and his other guests, is that correct?
I believe Mr. Tucker, there, says he was the driver. Whether or not he had access to that stuff at the same time, probably, but.
Do you know who Chris Tucker is?
Yes.
Okay, who is Chris Tucker?
He was an employee of the ranch.
Okay, are you thinking?
Or of Mr. Jackson.
Are you thinking of Chris Carter?
I'm sorry, Chris Tucker. Excuse me, I apologize.
Chris Tucker as the actor?
Chris Tucker is the actor, yes. I'm sorry.
Do you remember him visiting the ranch?
Yes.
And you would assume Chris Tucker would have.
Chris Tucker, I'm sorry. Thank you.
He would have full access to.
Yes, he would.
Alright, now, if we go to Exhibit 309, you may recall, let's show 309. There we go. You may recall that when we went through the gate logs, it appeared that Gavin, Starr and Devellin came back and Mr. Tucker was not there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, when they came back this time, they're estimated to arrive sometime in the evening. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they got there very early in the morning the next day. But here, Mr. Tucker is not there. They were not cleared for the quad runner or the jet skis, is that correct?
Yes.
And they were not cleared for horseback riding, is that correct?
Correct.
Based on your experience and understanding of these records kept in the ordinary course of business, who would have given those instructions?
Those instructions there?
Yes.
This would have come to us through the administration office.
Alright, so somebody in the chain of command above decided that, under these circumstances, that these children should not have access to the quads or the jet ski.
Correct.
Alright, we'll go to Exhibit 310. And this will be the second page of 310. And it appears that, the 1st of July 02. And it appears that Gavin, Starr and Devellin stayed overnight, correct?
Correct.
And then they left at 2114 hours, which would be 9:14 in the evening, correct?
Correct.
Now, then we skip ahead in time to September the 15th, which is the next record in the exhibit book which was presented to you by Mr. Auchincloss. And that shows September 15th 02, is that correct?
That's correct.
And on September 15th 02, we have Chris Tucker, Gavin, Starr, sister. It looks like it says Chris's nephew, is that correct?
Correct.
There's a star there. What does that mean?
Probably means that the time was either not written down when they came in, or it was, at that time. Whomever was checking people in the gate failed to write them in, or we just didn't know when they came in.
Okay, so every once in a while somebody makes a mistake, true?
Yes.
That will happen. And then it shows on that day, which is September 15th 02, Mr. Tucker and his group, including Gavin, Starr, sister, and Chris's nephew, all stayed overnight. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm going to go to Exhibit 312, September 16th 02, and here we have a record that Chris Tucker and his group stayed overnight. It also shows bus driver, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember if Chris Tucker had a bus?
I don't know if he personally had a bus. I don't remember.
Well, looks like the bus driver left with Chris Tucker and the rest of the party at 6:54 in the morning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, do you know if Mr. Jackson was at the ranch at these various times that we've covered so far?
I don't know.
Okay, now, 9 to 26. I'm sorry. This would be Exhibit 313, the second page. 9 to 26 at the top, 02. And I think you can read this, but if you can't, just tell me. I don't know if I made it better or worse. Okay, alright. Looks like Martin Bashir arrived at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and left at 6:13. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it looks like he probably arrived with some other people there. There's 3 other people, correct?
Correct.
We see Gary Hearn arrived at 2:30. Is that correct?
Yes.
Alright, looks like somebody adjusted that, but that was the way it was entered at the time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Alright, and it looks like, now, first of all, Gary Hearn is who?
Gary's a driver.
He's a driver for Michael Jackson and for Neverland. Is that correct?
Yes.
He often drives a limousine or whatever car is appropriate to transport people, correct?
Correct.
And Gary Hearn seems to have arrived with Gavin, Starr, and Davida, or Davila, or something, whatever that says, right?
Yes.
All at the same time. And then it appears that they were there from 2:30 and stayed overnight. Is that right?
Correct.
And then I'm going to put up 314, the second page. And it shows Gavin, Starr, and Davida. I think that's what it says. Stayed over that night as well, correct?
Correct.
And then I'm going to put up 315, page 2, for 9 to 28, okay? I'm going to go down to the bottom, and it looks like Gavin, Star, and Davida, or whatever that says, all right, stayed overnight, but they left at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it appears that Gary, down at the bottom, that's probably Gary Hearn, is that correct?
Most likely, yes.
And Gary Hearn came and went, but he came in about 3 o'clock, and then left at exactly 4 o'clock. Is that correct?
Yes.
So based on that, you would assume that he drove that Gavin, Star, and whoever Davida is. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it looks like it. It's really hard to see what that says there, but it does look like there's an entry, and I just want to clarify it so I don't get confused. It says something like, Maxim Bahit.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Alright, it's not Martin Bashir, though?
It doesn't look like Martin Bashir to me.
Alright, now, if somebody checks out, in other words, I say, checks out. If somebody goes through the gate, out, and then they go to dinner or to town or whatever, and they come back, when they come back, they should be logged back in again with the time.
Yes.
Does that sometimes not happen?
For employees? Sometimes.
For anybody.
Yeah, I'm sure there's times when it happens.
Alright, now, I'm going to skip way ahead, and you guys are going to be happy to hear that, to exhibit 331. Okay, I'm sorry. Better yet, 333. And I'm going to put 333 up. This is the second page of it. And there's a wide angle here. Okay, a medical report log. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that logs in various medical emergencies or skinned knees or anything else that happens that requires somebody to respond?
Each medical report for the year.
And on the other side, actually the front side of 333, there's a medical report for Star Arvizo. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you read that?
Not well, actually, that really hurts my eyes. If you could bring it up, that would be great.
Actually, I don't blame you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm giving you a copy of that page. Can you take a quick look at it there? And what I want to ask you is, basically, does this document reflect that Star Arvizo apparently had a fall on a scooter, slid on some loose gravel or something?
Yes.
And he had minor scrapes to his left knee, right ankle and right knee?
Yes.
So that sort of thing was documented carefully at Neverland, and that's an example of it, is that right?
Yes.
Alright, may I approach to retrieve that, Your Honor?
Yes.
Alright, I'm now going to go to Exhibit 334. For the benefit of the court and everybody else, it's probably about 90 pages, and so this is a part where I'm going to refer to. I'll just put the first page up so we can see it here, 334, and it's again one of the logs, which I believe here actually starts February 1st of 03, correct?
Yes.
Alright, and now I'm going to refer to a Bates stamp number, which is a number in the lower part of the document, generally the lower right corner, and I believe in all of these it starts out with MJ, and 2 zeros and then a number. And I will refer to that so we're on the same page.
Okay.
And I'm going to skip to page 116. That's MJ00116. And I'm going to show you this here. Now, this appears to be the format that was being used in 2003, is that correct?
Correct.
And I think it's a little different, at least a little different than some of the forms that were used because under guest information, you also have ranch vehicle information.
Yes.
Showing when people come in and out. On this particular document, oops, sorry. Let's try here. This is for February the 6th, 2003, is that correct?
Correct.
And it appears that at 2,243 hours, let's see. 2,245 hours, it should be 10:45 at night, it says, owner and guests, is that correct?
Yeah, could I see that page? I would assume it does.
May I see that?
May I approach?
Yes.
Based on the paperwork that we fill out, we would not have put owner, or Mr. Jackson, or anything that would represent him on this paperwork. In the time that I worked there, I have never done that I can remember. It could be owner and guest, which I didn't write it, but definitely could be.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'll ask you about that a little more so it makes sense.
Could I see that again?
Sure. This is Mr. Jackson's home, right?
Correct.
And so you were not only not required to, but you were really not supposed to write down Mr. Jackson comes and goes and log him in like somebody else, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, you saw what you thought said, owner and guest, may have said, owner and guest, you're not sure.
No.
But it would not be typical for you to write down, owner.
I've never done it. The whole time I was there, I'd never done it.
That's fine. And it does. It looks like it says, guest.
Yes.
Alright, it doesn't say who the guests are.
No.
And that's somewhat unusual, isn't it?
If someone had come in with Mr. Jackson, we don't routinely stop his vehicle and look in his vehicle. Again, it's privacy for him. We try to bother him as little as possible. So if someone had, if that is owner and guest, and someone had come with him, we would not have just stopped his vehicle and, for the most part, asked who was in there, unless we really felt it was necessary.
Do you want to leave that on?
Yeah.
Okay, alright, I won't put it here.
Yeah, that's fine.
I want to see if we can reconstruct this a little bit. Where it just says, guests, there are no names.
Correct.
So does that suggest to you that those guests were probably in a vehicle with Mr. Jackson?
It could have, yes, it could have been.
Alright, and now we're going to go to, and I'm sorry, that was on 2-6, February 6, 2003, correct? I'll put it up again if you want.
Yes, that's correct.
Alright, February 6, 2003. Do you know if Mr. Jackson was returning from Miami that night?
I don't know.
Okay, alright, and you're welcome to look at this whole exhibit, if you want me to bring the book down so you can see it, if you feel you need to look at the pages in order or anything, okay. I'm going to put up the 7th of February 03, which is MJ00120. And that is still a part of Exhibit 334, okay? And you can see we're referring to the 120 down there on the bottom, just so we're all oriented. That's what we call the Bates stamp number. This is for the 7th of February 03, is that correct?
Yes.
Alright, now, if you look at the guests, and I'm going to bring it a little closer and give everybody a headache, alright? If you look at the guests, it appears that there's an M. Nicole Cassio.
Yes.
Who stayed overnight, is that right?
Yes.
And it looks like a Dr. Farshian stayed overnight, is that correct?
Yes.
Actually, I'm going backwards. He's at the top of that list, right?
Right.
It looks like he left at 8:30 in the morning, right?
Right.
And then he may have come back at 10:15?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go down to Marie Nicole. Or it says, M. something, Nicole Cassio. You assume that's Marie Nicole?
Yes,
So, it says stayed over or carried over, so that would tell you she stayed overnight, is that right?
Yes.
Now that you think about that in conjunction with the whatever it was and guests, does that suggest that Marie Nicole Cassio was probably one of the guests that came in the day before?
Do you have the other pages for this?
I have.
There's usually like 3 pages per day.
Yes. You're welcome to look at them. We have to be careful because we've got the book apart, and I want to put it back. So we have to keep it in the same order here. Before I do, I'll let you see the whole thing, but it's safe to say you've got Gavin Arvizo, Star Arvizo, looks like, Daviela, now, Arvizo, Aldo Cassio, and Mom Arvizo, right?
Correct.
And those are all carryovers. So that would mean, to you, that they were there.
The night before.
The night before?
Prior to midnight of that day.
Of this day, which was 2-7.
Correct.
03. Okay. And it also appears that they then continued to stay overnight on the 7th, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So now having said that, if it's all right with the court, I'll approach with the book so that the witness can see everything in context. And I'll just speak loud for a moment, if I can. The pages are in the exact order of the exhibit, so keep them in that same order, if you would.
Yes. At some point, they came in on the 6th and were there on the 7th.
Alright, and as you look at that, before I come up and retrieve it, as you look at that, there's no specific record where those particular individuals, that is, the Cassios and the Arvizos, were logged in by name as coming in.
No.
Other than perhaps just that reference to owner and guest, or whatever it says. Is that correct?
Correct.
Alright, may I approach to retrieve the book, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, I'm going to go to page 121 of the same exhibit. It will still be 334 until further notice, if that's alright. So it says 121, MJ00121 at the bottom. And then this is, at the top, rather than guest. There are a number of people who are listed there. And this is, there's no date at the bottom of this, correct?
Correct.
So you need to try to ascertain the date by figuring out where it falls within the context of the other documents, right?
Correct. It would have been, again, with at least one, most likely two other pieces of paper that, gate logs.
Alright, and for the purpose of, well, I'll withdraw that. This shows that at the ranch, there were quite a number of people, is that correct?
Yes.
And it says, CBS Entertainment, there, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, it appears that on that list, I won't read them all, but on that list is Ed Bradley, is that right?
Yes.
Are you familiar with Ed Bradley of CBS?
Yes.
And Jack Sussman, is he a producer at CBS? You don't know?
I have no idea.
That's okay. There are a number of other people associated with CBS there, right?
Yes.
And it indicates that all the people associated with CBS, at least down to the point that it's recorded, let me withdraw that. It looks like Jack Sussman arrived at 9:40, is that right?
Yes.
Doesn't show that he was checked out?
No.
Okay, we assume he's not still there.
Yes.
Okay, you got Ed Bradley. Can you read that?
Yes. The times?
Yeah, the times.
10:32, it's either 18 or 1900. So 6 or 7 p.m.
And then the rest of them are 10:30 to 7 p.m., is that correct?
Yes.
10:30 to 7 p.m. Were you on duty that day?
I don't know.
Do you remember there being a large group of people?
I don't remember being there when CBS was there.
Alright, that's fair enough. Alright, now we go to page 123, which is dated. By that I mean MJ00123, which is dated the 9th of February 03, correct?
Yes.
And here we show on the 9th of February, 2003, that you have Gavin Arvizo, Star Arvizo, Devellin Arvizo. It shows they were all, if you just look at those entries, they were all carried over from the night before?
Correct.
And then it shows that they left at about 1 to 30.
Yes.
And apparently left with the person right before there, whose name is, Marie Nicole.
Yes.
That says, Marie Nicole, right above, Gavin Arvizo.
Yes.
So they all left at 1:30. Doesn't tell you where they went. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then they came back at 4:15 in the afternoon?
Yes.
It does appear that there are two other people down at the bottom, Ana Ruiz and looks like Silvana Ruiz. Do you see those?
Yes.
Looks like they left at 13:30, which is 1:30, and came back at 4:15, right?
Correct.
And it says, limo, there. Does that mean they went by limo?
Yes.
And you don't know how the Arvizos traveled on that occasion, do you?
No.
You would assume that somebody gave them a ride, though?
Yes.
Okay, and then it shows next they're carried over. That being the Arvizos, they're carried over. They stayed overnight, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we have page MJ00126, which shows the 10th of February 03, correct?
Correct.
And here we see the Arvizos and Marie Nicole staying overnight, is that correct?
That's correct.
And it shows their Mrs. Arvizo as well, under Ana Ruiz, correct?
Yes.
And it appears that they stayed overnight. Not only were they overnight the night before, but they're staying overnight the next night, is that correct?
Yes.
So that's the 10th. Now, did the procedures change at some point to where you would start logging in where people were staying at the ranch?
Yes.
Alright, I want to show you the 11th of February 03, which is 00129, Bates stamp number 129. Okay, the 11th of February 03, correct?
Yes.
And here on 2 to 11. Oops, sorry. it appears that Dieter Weisner was staying in guest unit number 4.
Yes.
And he stayed overnight?
Yes.
If you go down to the next, it shows Janet Arvizo.
Yes.
Alright, I'm sorry. When I said, the next, I meant to say skip one. It goes down to Janet Arvizo, guest unit number 2.
Yes.
Stayed overnight, or she was staying overnight, correct, from the night before?
Yes.
But on this day, and again, this day, being February the 11th, then Arvizo leaves at 5:04 in the afternoon, correct?
Correct.
And she comes back at 3 minutes to 8 o'clock?
Correct.
Okay, it shows, Gavin and Star, house.
Yes.
That means they're staying at the house, according to this.
Yes.
And then it shows, now. What does that say now?
It looks like Daniela.
Okay, seems this name changes continuously. But anyway, whoever that is, D. Arvizo, whatever it says there, is staying in unit number 2. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then Marie Nicole is staying in the doll room, right?
Yes.
That's in the house?
Correct.
And Aldo, her brother, is staying in the house. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Ronald Konitzer is there in unit number 1, correct?
Yes.
Is that right? And his wife and 2 children are also staying there at the ranch in unit number 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, units 1, 2, 3 and 4 are the 4 guest units that are right by the lake. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they're just across the front.
Grass.
Yeah, the front entrance.
The driveway.
The driveway for the entry of the house. They're right across from the front of the house in a building that has 4 units in it.
Yes.
Alright, so according to this, Ronald Konitzer, his wife and children, are staying in 1. Develin's in 2 with Janet. And there are these other 2 people. Dieter's in 4. And this Mark Lester, whoever that is in 3, right?
Right.
Now, excuse me 1 second. I think it got cut off here. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. On this, at the bottom here, same page, we're still on 129 for February 11th, 03. At the very bottom, you have ranch vehicles, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to direct your attention to the one just before the bottom. It says, Katie, and it's kind of cut off, but it's Katie Bernard. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know who Katie Bernard is?
Yes.
Who is she?
She's a secretary for the ranch.
Works at the ranch?
Yes.
Is she a nice person?
Very nice.
It says, black van, right?
Yes.
And what is the black van?
Black van. It would be it's a ranch vehicle that usually Gary drives.
Okay, so it's a vehicle that's used to drive people places. If the guests want to go to town or do something else, or go to the airport or whatever, it can be used for that, correct?
Yes.
Alright, now, it looks like Katie Bernard checks the black van out and then she leaves at 4 minutes, at 5:04. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it appears that she is taking Janet Arvizo off the ranch, correct?
They at least left at the same time.
If it's down to the minute, they're either right in the same car or one right behind the other.
Yes.
But usually it's the same car, right?
Yes.
It would be 17:05 by the time you get to the next car, probably, right?
Yes.
Now, it looks like Katie Bernard was gone long enough to, say, go to town, drop somebody off and come back, right?
Yes.
Alright, now we go to 2 to 12. And this is page 132, 00132, and it shows February the 12th, 2003. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Alright, now, here, let's start with the guests. And I think it's obvious to everybody. The Xerox machine evidently cut off the edge of the page there, correct?
Yes.
Here it appears that there are a number of guests overnight, including Gavin, Star, and Develin. However her name is spelled, alright?
Yes.
We'll call her Develin, alright?
Okay.
It appears that they stayed overnight, correct?
Yes.
And then it appears, and Janet as well, correct? It says Janet, Gavin, Star, Develin.
Yes.
They all stayed overnight, and then they all left at 1:38 in the morning, is that right?
That's right.
So when they went to the gate, whoever was driving them stopped the vehicle and said, "We're leaving." And we have Janet, Gavin, Star and Devellin here, correct?
Yes.
So the person at the gate, the guard at the gate, could check all these people out at that date?
Yes.
There was no secret spiriting of people away. This was checking right out at the gate?
Objection. Argumentative.
That probably was. I'll withdraw it.
All right. I'll sustain the objection.
There we go. In other words, this is done according to procedure. A car comes up. The driver identifies the people in the car?
Either the driver or the security officer.
Or the security officer looks in and sees who it is, and he opens the gate and they go, right?
Correct.
Alright, if you look at the bottom here, we also have something that says, Solace, and it just says, U.S. Solace, but your bet would be that's Jesus Solace, correct?
Yes.
Just got cut off by the Xerox machine. And he checks out the Rolls Royce, right?
Correct.
Do you know what kind of Rolls Royce that is?
I don't know which one exactly that is. There was a couple. They were older.
Nice car?
Nice, yes.
Nice car, alright. And he checked it out according to the ranch procedures, correct?
Correct.
And he checks out, it goes out at 1:38, correct?
Yes.
He does whatever he does, and he gets back, in the Rolls Royce, by 9:08 in the morning, correct?
Yes.
Now, Gary Hearn was there. He's a driver, correct?
Yes.
And he was staying overnight, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm going to go to 135. Hold on 1 second. Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Let me skip ahead a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go to 149. Show the bottom first. 149. Now, it says 2 to 17 through February 26, 03. Is that a typical way to do this?
It has, I've seen it done. I think it says 2 to 20, but
2 to 20, you're right, I'm sorry. 2 to 17 through 2 to 20?
the reason we would do something like this would be if we knew we were going to have guests for a certain period of time.
So you have here, and let me do this, first of all, so we can see it, and then I'll focus in a little better for you. At the top where it says, ordinarily you'd put your service people and whatnot up there, that's crossed out and it just says, guest list, and the whole page is used for guest list.
Yes.
Down through the first two parts of it, in any event, is that right?
Yes.
And on the guest list, let me see if we can get closer and read it. Can you find the one that I did?
Yeah.
Let me borrow that. 2 to 17 through 2 to 20, it shows, well, it looks like Davidia Arvizo was staying overnight, had been staying overnight, is that correct?
Stayed overnight at least once.
Alright, and then it shows out at 1951, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know what day she left at 1951, 7:51 in the evening?
No.
Alright, and then you have Gavin is also staying overnight and leaves at 1951, correct?
Yes.
And you have Janet, who leaves at 2145.
Yes.
And then, again, Star is 1951?
Yes.
And here it shows that the Arvizos are staying. It says,
I would assume it's dance studio.
staying at the dance studio?
Yes.
Alright, and it shows the Cassios, Aldo and Marie Nicole, are staying at the main house, is that correct?
Yes.
And then there's a number of other people there who are staying in the guest units down there. We don't have to go through all of the names, but I see Ann Konitzer and kids as in one.
Yes.
With Ronald Konitzer?
Yes.
And there are other people staying in the other units, right?
Yes.
Okay, now, if we go to MJ00151, it says 2 to 18. And it doesn't show all those guests that you showed. I'm sorry. It does not show all the guests that were shown on page 149 that we just looked at. Is that right?
Correct.
So since the other one said 2 to 17 through 2 to 20, you would assume that some or all of those people were continuing to stay overnight. Is that correct?
Yes. We most likely had that one that you just showed without the guests. We had that for every day.
Okay.
Up through that period, because we would still need to have written down somewhere where those people, our general deliveries, contractors or whatever, were still coming in.
If we go to 155, which is for 2 to 19, it doesn't show all those other guests that were listed, correct?
Correct.
But it does show some new guests, for instance, fan club people there,
Yes.
who apparently came onto the ranch for a while. Is that correct?
For the day, it looks like.
Okay, now, I'm going to go to February 20th, 03, which is 157. And again, if you want to look at any of the pages in between, you're welcome to do it. I'm trying to pick out the ones that count here, but you can look at anything you want. So this is February 20th, 03, and this shows guests as of 2 to 20. It shows Asha Pryor coming in at 14:20 hours.
Yes.
Along with Dustin Tucker. Is that her son?
I don't know.
Okay, Asha Pryor is Chris Tucker's girlfriend? Or you don't?
I have no idea.
Okay, do you know who Asha Pryor is at all?
No.
In any event, whoever they are came in at 14:20. At the same time, Gavin, Starr and Devellin came in at 1420 hours, is that correct?
Yes.
So evidently they left sometime before the time that they returned on 2 to 20, right?
Yes.
And I showed you that other page where it said 2 to 17 to 2 to 20, is that correct?
Yes.
And it showed some out times, but it didn't tell you the day?
Right.
So if somebody were to have left, say, on the 19th, the time was there, but you wouldn't have the day to determine whether it was the 19th, the 17th, or what.
If that's how that particular paper was kept, yes. I don't know exactly what was going on. Why, I'm sure we had the extra sheet because we had so many people.
Alright.
One thing you need to do is to keep referring to the page number.
Did I fail to do that on the last one?
I don't think you did. Maybe I missed it, but
Okay, I'm sorry. The one that I just put up was 00157.
yes,
And that is for February 20th, 03.
you did refer to it. I just missed it. I'm sorry. Is this a good place to stop?
Fine, Your Honor.
All right, we'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 8:30. Remember the admonition.